Today I want to talk about what the 180-degree shutter rule is. In the film and video world, we use something called frame rates. And when things are shot in real time, it's usually done in 24 frames per second. What that essentially means is when shot at that specific frame rate, the film advances only at 1/24th of a second per frame. We'll talk a little bit more about this right now. And so the studio is right up against the Hollywood Hills, and if you go up into the hills, there's so many different roads, it's almost impossible to explore it all. So today I decided to go up this random road, and this is extremely steep. I'm on water right now, so I gotta be really careful. I have to hold my brakes while I'm going down those. I'm gonna go way too fast, which also concerns me a little bit for the battery recharging. That's sketchy. That was sketchy. Just holding my brakes. That was sketchy because that was very wet, and I had to hold my brakes going down it, otherwise I would have gone way too fast. But whew, okay, made it, we're alive. It's crazy because it's so quiet up there. I just charged 10% of my battery just now coming down from that hill. That was crazy steep. And I'm like right around the block from the office now. But I really want to get an example for you guys to show you what that 24 frames per second looks like with motion blur. So let's get onto the Boulevard here. That mentioning of motion blur, if I freeze a frame right there, you will see that the car has some blurriness to it. Now we stick to that 180-degree shutter rule because the lower you go in the shutter speed, the more blurry the movements become. And if you go higher, the more frozen in frame it'll become. It looks a little more cinematic, it looks more realistic when you have that right amount of motion blur, and that's where the 180-degree shutter rule comes from. Let's move because it's really loud, and I just wanted to give you guys that quick example. Hi, office. So what happens if you're following that 180-degree rule and your shutter speed is already at 50, your ISO's at 100 or the lowest it can get, and you're at a low frame rate like 24 frames per second, chances are, especially when you're outdoors or in super bright environments, your picture's gonna be blown out. So rather than changing your aperture to compensate for that exposure, you wanna use something called neutral density filter. And that's what this is. So on this lens, I have what's called a neutral density filter. It's a variable neutral density filter. So I can churn it. And that's where the word variable comes from. So I can turn it to an ND stop 4 or bring it all the way up to 32. Let me pull one out to show you guys what it looks like. So I have a couple in here. This is another variable neutral density filter. And when I turn it, you can see it becomes more transparent. So it's pretty much just a filter. It screws right onto your lens, and it's a great way to reduce the amount of light going into the camera. One mistake that I made a lot of times when I first started, when I started getting real serious about video creating, I would either crank up my shutter speed and then have a very choppy looking background where every movement was just frozen in frame, 24 in a second, almost like a bunch of photos were just sequenced together. But then I started to learn that motion blur actually looks really nice and really cinematic. That's when I learned about neutral density filters and the importance of them. Now that I've become more educated on it, I've easily learned that they are actually a necessity. And if you're gonna get serious about video creating, then you need one of these too. It's definitely a tool that you want in your bag. Okay, so I know I just mentioned how they're a necessity, and they are. But you can still get away with a good looking film without a neutral density filter. But at that point, you'd want to be relying on your aperture to reduce the amount of light being let into your camera. So a higher f-stop value or a smaller aperture would mean a darker image. You can easily do it that way. Though we usually are looking for a specific look, and a lot of it has to do with how blurry the background is from the subject, things like that, which all play a role in why you need one of these filters right here. See, because it's a variable, when I go in the shade like this, I can turn this thing and make my picture brighter. And that's the difference of having a variable. That's the difference from having a variable versus a prime or a static neutral density filter. You can actually twist it and have some dynamic quality to it.
See you later again. God bless, dude. Take care of yourself.
See you later, man.
Hey. How's it going, bud?
Good, how are you? Good. Thanks. If anyone's curious about what neutral density filter I'm using, this is actually the K&F Concept variable ND filter. I just did an unboxing on it and I totally recommend you check it out if you're in the market for one of these. It's a great little neutral density filter. I think it costed me 50 or 60 bucks. And that's actually a fairly priced one. You can either go, you know, the $100 plus ones, or you can go to like the $20 ones. I don't recommend the lower ones. If you're interested in purchasing one of these K&F Concept ND filters, I'm gonna drop a link in the description below, straight to Amazon. Totally recommend it, guys. Way better than the cheaper ones. Get something that you know works, that you trust, and I'll tell you now that I trust this thing. I've been through a few of them and I do like this one. I recommend a static or a prime one for photography, while for video, I would recommend the variable. That's just my preference. But if you do end up buying one of these, make sure you know your lens thread size. Like this is an 82, you might have a 67 or a 77. The size you want to refer to is the lens thread size, which can be shown at the very end. It's that little micro fitting threaded area at the very tip of your lens. And then also in the description, I'll link my unboxing video where you can actually see me unbox this thing. And that's it, guys. Thank you for watching. I appreciate your time. Please subscribe, ring the notification bell. I'm uploading a lot more often. I have a lot more stuff to share with you. I appreciate it. I appreciate each one of you. Like the video if it helps you in any way. And I will see you in the next video. Peace.